We begin with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and her plan to reset relations with Ottawa. The Liberal government is positioning Canada for a net zero future, and that often puts it directly at odds with Alberta. Can they find common ground? And Premier Danielle Smith joins me now. Premier, it's good to speak with you again.
Well, thanks for having me.
When we last spoke, you talked about resetting the relationship with Ottawa. I wonder, now that you've met with Ministers Wilkinson and LeBlanc, how confident are you that Alberta and Ottawa can work together on a sustainable jobs plan?
Well, it all very much depends on what their next step is, because I think when we're talking about sustainable jobs, as long as we're talking about things like carbon capture, utilization and storage, and hydrogen and LNG export, geothermal, building interties between us and the provinces that have hydroelectric power, investing in small modular nuclear, those are things that we can work together on. And they seem to be moving in that direction. That's very positive. But remember where we began in the discussion of that. There was a sort of an expectation that the oil and natural gas industry would be phased out. And I had to draw a very firm line saying the oil and gas industry is phasing out of emissions. They are not phasing out of production. And so I think as long as we have a meeting of the minds there, we'll be able to find some really constructive ways to move forward.
There are some projections, though, Premier, that the oil and gas sector could phase out itself just because of the global trends and market forces. We see Canada's energy regulator, it released modeling that suggests a total collapse of oil prices and oil production is possible by 2050, and at minimum, there's going to be substantial upheaval in the industry. So when you look at that, doesn't that underline the need to find the common ground with Ottawa here?
No, I reject modeling. I mean, no one can predict the future. In fact, one of the conferences I always used to go to, which was quite fun, is they always tried to predict a year ahead what the oil and natural gas prices were, and they're always wrong. I mean, I think what we're seeing is that there is a transition. Every single type of energy source is going to be implemented, and natural gas and oil are going to have different uses in the future. We're already seeing it. For instance, natural gas is now being converted into hydrogen and ammonia. Those are going to be fuels of the future. So that makes sure that the natural gas industry is going to thrive. Our bitumen sector, one of the main things that we can make out of bitumen is asphalt. And whether you're driving a regular combustion engine vehicle or a zero emissions vehicle, you're going to need roads to drive on. So those are the kind of transitions that I think we'll see, is that the products will be used in a different way. But I'm very confident that making investments now to make sure that Alberta is decarbonizing, have the lowest emissions barrels, I think that's going to make sure that we have a very strong industry for decades and decades to come, and that not only us, but the rest of the country will benefit from that.
Sorry, you say you reject the modeling. Do you completely reject these projections? Because if you look at a lot of where global capital is going, it is shying away from this sort of investment just because of the emissions footprint and the carbon costs of these things. So I just wonder if you could explain that a little bit further.
No, that's not the case. What is happening is that dollars are moving towards carbon capture, utilization and storage so that we can find a way to capture the emissions to continue using the industry. We've got experiments and innovations that are happening around direct air capture, where we've got some leading companies that are working on that particular approach. And hydrogen is, we've already seen major investments being announced in Alberta around the basis of ammonia and hydrogen and other products made from natural gas. So I would say that what I would observe is that, I mean, even look at Norway. Norway just announced another $18 billion in investment in oil and natural gas. The Americans have announced multi-billion dollar investments in LNG. I think Canada has to stop being so defeatist. I think we need to be in this race, and we need to be acting like we are going to be the last producer standing as opposed to the first one out. And that's the perception I'm intending to change in this country.
Right. Okay. So I guess this brings me back to the resetting of the relationship and finding the common ground with the federal government, because they want to see an emissions cap, for example, as a centerpiece of their carbon reduction plan. This is something that you have said is a non-starter as far as you're concerned. It seems like where you are on this in terms of rejecting this modeling and where they are on this and sort of being guided by this modeling, there's quite a gap between the two levels of government here.
No, I think we're in sync on wanting to make sure that we're able to provide for the market the products that they need with lower and lower emissions. And the question is how quickly we get there, and whether we can make some of the targets that they want to do on an interim basis. I've told the Prime Minister and I've told the ministers that we're aligned in Alberta with their target of 2050, which is what they have signed on to be carbon neutral. And the issue that we have is that they are trying to accelerate some of these targets in a way that's unachievable. If you try to put forward a target by 2030 to have oil and natural gas emissions reduced 42%, I've told them very clearly, it can't be done. It cannot be done without shutting in production, and that's not what we are interested in seeing in Alberta. Same with the net zero power grid. We've got 90% of our power grid on natural gas. It simply cannot be net zero by 2035. Give us more time, allow for the technology around small modular nuclear to develop, allow us to develop out our carbon capture infrastructure and our storage hubs, and give it a longer time frame. Those are the kind of things that we're working on. But we're aligned with the federal government on their 2050 goals, and we just have to make sure that they're in alignment with the emissions plan that we put forward.
Okay, I just want to get through a couple of topics in the time we have left. At the Western Premiers meeting yesterday, Premier Eby expressed on behalf of the Premier some disappointment that the bail reform legislation did not make it through in this session of Parliament. Now, the government still seems intent on doing it. It's just going to be later in the year. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have any concerns on the pace that this is going at?
Major concerns. I mean, they managed to move at lightning speed to reaffirm the equalization approach, which we have a major objection to. We've had a referendum in our province saying that we reject the current approach to equalization. They raced that through and got that approved. And then I think they would have been able to get all-party approval on the approach that we want to take, which is to ensure that violent and repeat offenders are kept behind bars rather than going out onto the streets to commit more crimes. And it's very disappointing that they didn't see their way through to accelerating that change. It was a mistake when they made these changes a few years ago. We thought we had their commitment to work on it, and unfortunately, it's now being pushed off. And meanwhile, what's happening is the courts are continuing to let really bad criminals back out on the street to cause harm, and there's going to be consequences to that, and that is such a shame.
I want to pivot to some news out of your province, because more than 100 doctors have signed an open letter condemning Alberta Health Services' decision to revoke Dr. Dina Hinshaw's job offer. This is also being criticized by the Indigenous Physicians Association. Why did this happen, Premier, and did your office play any role in this, and will you do anything about it?
Look, I hired an official administrator to help me oversee changes in the health system. It's been underperforming for almost 2 decades, and we've got to make some serious changes. My priority is to focus on ways of getting more doctors, nurses, paramedics on the front line, reducing EMS, reducing hospital wait times, increasing surgeries. And I've charged Dr. John Cowell to put the right team in place to be able to do that. And so I have to trust his judgment when he makes decisions on personnel. And so those are questions left for him. But there's going to be a lot of personnel changes that are going to happen as we make these kinds of reforms. That's what happens when you're trying to get an underperforming system to perform better.
So is that who made the decision to unhire Dina Hinshaw?
These personnel decisions at AHS are the decision of the official administrator, correct?
Okay. All right, Premier, just as a final question, I wonder if you, as a Premier, if you have any thoughts on C-18 and the fallout there, the threats from Meta and Google to block Canadian news and the inability of Canadian news sites to be shared on the tech giants.
Well, I think it's disappointing for consumers, because consumers have, I think, become used to having these aggregator sites as an easy way to be able to access news sources. And I'm very concerned about what will happen to mainstream media and to the alternative media if they don't have those kinds of easy options to get their product to the eyes of viewers. So I don't know that I guess we'll have to see what the consequences are. And if there are serious ones, then we're going to have to press the federal government to make adjustments and go in a different direction. I know that's a mixed review in the media world. Some were cheering this along. Others were saying it's going to be devastating. So we're going to be watching it. But I think the main thing we should all be striving for is that we need to have a maximum number of news sources covering things from a variety of perspectives, because that's what really is the importance of the media, and being able to provide all of that content to viewers. And that's what I'm worried about, is that some of that's going to be compromised.
You say you will have to press, or we will have to press the federal government. Does that mean you as a government of Alberta? Do you mean the premiers as a collective, or what do you mean by that exactly, Premier?
Well, as you've seen with the premiers, we have had success when we identify a problem that is impacting each of our jurisdictions. In the case of bail reform, we have been able to successfully press for change. This is something that's so new. We're just going to monitor it, and we'll see if every premier feels the same. That would be one of the forums to be able to press forward on it. It is a national decision, and so oftentimes it's the collective action. A premier saying you made a wrong move on this that is going to cause the change in direction. It's a bit too soon for me to be able to tell, because I think it just occurred.
Okay, Premier Danielle Smith, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.